Urgent, Crimea, time to leave. The Ukrainian armed forces are preparing to break in. A new frontline Cauldron is being set up for the enemy right at this moment. Europe's emergency decision is underway. Drone coup. The Ukrainian armed forces are cutting Moscow off from Russia, a local defeat. Putin is struggling with his last strength. A nuclear strike from 2 cities at once. All this in our episode, Hellpoint, Urgent, a massive attack on Crimea. Our forces are clearing the way straight to the Peninsula. The West has given the signal, the beginning of the liberation of Ukrainian territories. It's hard to believe. A strike that will change everything. The AFU are about to strike as if it's their last chance. Moscow will send a desperate message to Crimea. The turning point in the war has come. The countdown has begun. Could it be that the Crimean bridge is living its last days? More on this in just a moment.
Ukraine may attack Crimea. Such a bold statement was made by Sky News analyst Michael Clark. He is not talking about the usual strikes that the defense forces carry out almost daily, but about a large-scale one. According to Clark, Ukraine could launch an airstrike or a naval landing against Russian positions in Crimea. And in his opinion, this will happen before winter.
Ukrainians love to make surprises. They know that this affects not only the Russians on the front line, but also the West's perception of how things are going in Ukraine.
The Sky News analyst also believes that, thanks to Ukraine's long-range strike capabilities, an attack on the Kerch Bridge cannot be ruled out.
You can effectively create a significant breach in the air defense curtain, and then you'll certainly want to put something substantial into it to get something even more valuable and worthwhile.
Ukraine attacked the Kerch Bridge 3 times. In 2022, a truck loaded with the equivalent of 20 tons of explosives in TNT was used to strike the crossing. In 2023, the bridge was attacked by naval combat drones, and in 2025, the Security Service of Ukraine blew up the Kerch Bridge underwater. Explosives were planted near key supports. While the analyst's suggestion of a 4th attack may seem encouraging, official Kyiv is not thrilled about it.
Certainly, there's no need to write about this today. These are somewhat different kinds of wars, and in general, there's no need to announce intentions for a practical war that has been going on for 4 years. Russia is still investing significant resources in countering Ukraine. We can see everything they're doing. And I won't comment. It's not quite appropriate to discuss offensive operations.
Experts and military personnel are also against such loud statements. As for Crimea, demilitarization is indeed underway at full speed, but that's all you need to know.
First of all, let's put it this way. This is a private opinion of a private individual which has nothing to do with the real state of affairs. The only way to interpret such a publication is as an emphasis that Crimea, the temporarily occupied Ukrainian peninsula, has not only remained on the agenda for our country's defense forces, but is now undergoing not just active planning, but an active stage of demilitarization of the temporarily occupied Crimea. All these so-called analytical assessments and forecasts, I want to emphasize once again, have nothing even remotely to do with the realities that are actually taking place. The reality at the moment is that the defense forces, in particular the main intelligence directorate, as you know, the security service, the Navy, the armed forces of Ukraine and other relevant structures are carrying out the necessary work.
This work consists of ongoing targeted operations to destroy Russian radar systems, air defense installations, aircraft, and so on. All of this is something Ukrainians can witness almost every day. And such methodical destruction of Russian weaponry is not happening by chance, confirms the spokesperson of the Ukrainian Navy, Dmytro Pletenchuk. This is exactly where it all begins.
If you want to influence the enemy on their territory or on your own territory that the enemy has occupied, the first thing you need to do is eliminate all obstacles. This will give you an advantage at sea, because that in turn means an advantage on land as well. In order to gain it, you need to eliminate the enemy's means of counteraction, that is, destroy their air defense systems. That's why this is the priority target from which any further action begins.
But what exactly will the next action be? That doesn't need to be known. Speculation won't do any good, especially from Western analysts. There's no need to interfere with the work of the defense forces. And that's a rule Ukrainians have learned well over almost 4 years of full-scale war.
This is a real drone onslaught. The EU is pouring in money. For Ukraine, technology is soaring to the skies while Russia is baring its teeth. The US is delivering the final blow. Long-range weapons are aimed at Moscow. It seems the situation has gotten out of control, and on top of that, the Kremlin is being exposed. Shock, rage, and defeat have crept up on the enemy unexpectedly. A painful strike is already on its way. You need to be the first to hear about these explosive details.
Even more aid and support, the European Commission has agreed with Ukraine to allocate 2 billion euros for drone production. The funding is intended to help strengthen defense capabilities and develop advanced technologies that will also benefit the European Union.
If we still consider Ukraine to be our first line of defense, we must strengthen military assistance to Ukraine. That is why we have specifically agreed with Ukraine that a total of 2 billion euros will now be spent on drones. This allows Ukraine to scale up and utilize its full potential. And of course, this will also allow the EU to benefit from this technology.
Since the start of the full-scale war, Ukraine has increased the production of weapons and the implementation of new technologies, which are already being used at the front. The volume of domestic weapons production has increased several times over.
This indicates an increase in the capabilities of Ukraine's defense forces. First and foremost, this concerns the ability to strike military targets on the territory of the Russian Federation. Let me remind you, earlier Germany announced the allocation of 1.8 billion euros to the Ukrainian side for the production of strike drones and the manufacturing of Ukrainian standoff missiles. In other words, EU countries continue to demonstrate unity when it comes to strengthening the defense capabilities of Ukraine's armed forces.
Moreover, Ukraine is negotiating a mega deal with the United States worth $90 billion for the procurement of weapons. Kyiv has provided Washington with a document outlining all its military needs, including requests for long-range weapons systems. First of all,
we will receive air defense systems. These include in particular Patriot missile systems. By the way, President Zelensky has already noted that the Patriot air defense system has been actively protecting Ukraine's airspace for a month now. In addition, NASAM's air defense systems, which are a joint American-Norwegian production, will also be supplied, and first and foremost, means of destruction. This refers to a range of 450 kilometers in terms of tactical and technical specifications. And most importantly, their quantity is 3,030.
And while this agreement is still at the negotiation stage, 6 countries have already financed 4 defense aid packages for Ukraine totaling over $2 billion as part of the initiative for Ukraine's list of priority requirements.
The order is being formed based on the needs of Ukraine's defense forces. In addition, this makes it possible to speed up logistics, transfers, and responses by delivering American weapons directly to Ukraine's defense forces. This is significant as it increases the capabilities of Ukraine's defense forces in countering Russian occupation troops at the moment.
Meanwhile, there is the mentioned possibility of legally using frozen Russian assets. The European Union is discussing the possibility of providing Ukraine with about 140 billion euros in the form of a so-called reparations loan. There are proposals to allocate some of this money for the purchase of European weapons and the rest for financing Ukraine's budgetary needs. However, not everyone agrees with such proposals. French President Emmanuel Macron is critical of such initiatives.
He points out the lack of legal mechanisms here. The European Commission said A but did not say B. It was a political statement not backed by legal grounds. We should not make empty promises. You perfectly understand that there are no enforcement mechanisms. That is, the statement by the European Commission should be viewed as nothing more than a political declaration or as an element of political and economic pressure on the Russian Federation at the time of the end of the war in Ukraine. And Macron's statements indicate an understanding of these processes.
In turn, the United Kingdom has already spent over £1 billion on supplying weapons and military support to Ukraine, using funds obtained from frozen Russian assets.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine today. Join us now.
Moscow has played itself into a corner. The Ukrainian armed forces are striking at the heart of the Kremlin, leaving the Russian capital without light and heat. The time for retribution has come. Blackout mode is at full power. Tomorrow, drones will do what Putin has feared the most. The enemy is in a panic. Ukrainian weapons are more charged than ever, breathing fire and eager for battle. And the apocalypse is breathing down the Putin regime's neck. The dictator stubbornly thinks this is all just a nightmare. But the reality is quite different, and we'll tell and show you exactly what it is right now.
Russians, including Muscovites, should prepare for a cold and difficult winter. If Russia does not stop its strikes on Ukraine's energy facilities, Moscow will face a blackout.
We shouldn't be too cautious in our rhetoric with the Russians. If Russia's goal is a blackout in Ukraine and they are pursuing this every winter, I'm not sure our response or that of our partners should be any different. If they threaten a blackout, for example in the capital of Ukraine, then the Kremlin should know that there will also be a blackout in their own capital.
Ukrainian strikes and our own production of drones and missiles are the best arguments in any negotiations with Putin, because the Kremlin only understands the language of force.
If any attempts to attack the Kremlin are indeed made, how exactly will we perceive that situation?
Well, listen, our Supreme Commander-in-Chief, the President, has already spoken on this topic. So it's better not to talk about this, and everyone understands that.
For the first time since the beginning of the war, on the eve of winter, Ukraine, thanks to its own production, as well as supplies from its allies, has achieved parity in long-range capabilities with the occupiers.
Taking into account the climatic features of the Russian Federation and the tactical and technical characteristics of the means of destruction on the Ukrainian side, the Russian Federation is facing a harsh winter, both literally and figuratively. First and foremost, this concerns thermal power plants and other production facilities that support the vital activities of major Russian cities.
To strike at regions and cities bordering Ukraine, Kyiv has a wide range of Western missiles at its disposal.
After the recent statement by the Ukrainian president about his conversation with Trump, during which the possibility of strikes on energy facilities of the Russian Federation was discussed as a retaliatory action in response to hostile acts by the Russian side, the corresponding approval was received. Therefore, we can say that the territories of the Rostov, Kursk, Belgorod and Bryansk regions are within the strike zone of Western weapons. This is once again evidenced by the attacks using the Scalp Storm Shadow, only accordingly in a modernized version of the S-200 surface-to-air missile system.
The systematic destruction of Russian oil refineries by Ukrainian drones shows that Russian air defense is incapable of protecting critical infrastructure facilities.
In several districts of the Belgorod region, only a 100 gasoline and diesel fuel are available at gas stations. Also, subscribers are reporting fuel problems in the Nizhny Novgorod and Samara regions. It would be truly epic if, in the fourth year of the war, we still can't take out their energy sector, but they manage to take out ours.
If, for strikes on the Russian border regions, Ukraine can use Western-supplied missiles and its own drones, then for Moscow and other remote cities, the threat comes from Ukrainian drones with a range of up to 3,000 kilometers and a warhead weighing up to 1,000 kilograms.
What does a one-ton warhead provide? For example, if it hits a target like an industrial facility, 2 such missiles would completely disable it for at least a year. There would be a crater about 20 meters in diameter.
A mirror response will definitely come. If they try again to cut off electricity and heat for Ukrainians, the Russian leadership is dooming millions of Russians to experience all the charms of blackouts themselves.
It could happen any day now. Could it be that Putin will actually press that same red button? There are some signals. It will all start with the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. A nuclear threat is hanging like a dark cloud. The Kremlin is playing with fire. Everything is on the edge. The madness of the dictator could doom half the planet. The risks are too high. Putin could make his move at any moment now.
The Ministry of Energy of Ukraine does not rule out the possibility of a nuclear or radiological accident at the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, which is occupied by Russian forces. The ministry made this statement in response to a request from the Radio Liberty Project. The Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant is the largest nuclear facility in Europe and the 3rd largest in the world by total capacity. Before Russia's full-scale invasion, the plant was supplied by 10 power transmission lines. Due to shelling by the occupiers as of 2025, only 2 of them remained operational. One of them failed at the beginning of May, and on September 23rd, the last line connecting the plant to the Ukrainian power grid was shut down.
As a result, the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant is now operating on backup diesel generators. The agency calls this mode of operation unprecedented, since it was not envisioned in the plant's design. The safety systems have been operating solely on diesel generators for an extended period. Therefore, there is no reliable data on the guaranteed duration of their uninterrupted operation or on their reliability indicators under such a load. The situation is further complicated by the gradual degradation of equipment as well as the inability to carry out necessary scheduled repairs and maintenance work. This significantly increases the risk of diesel generator failure and accordingly creates a threat of shutting down the nuclear fuel cooling systems and disconnecting critically important safety systems, which could lead to the development of a nuclear and radiological accident.
Earlier, President Zelensky also spoke about the unprecedented danger looming not only over Ukraine.
And the plant is not designed for this and has never operated in such a mode for so long. And we already have information that one of the generators has failed. It is the Russians themselves who, through shelling, are preventing the repair of power lines to the plant and the restoration of basic safety. And this is a threat to absolutely everyone. No terrorist in the world has ever allowed themselves to do to a nuclear plant what Russia is doing now. And it is right that the world does not remain silent.
Even the IAEA has called the situation threatening. By the way, on the third day after the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant was left without electricity, the agency's Director General, Rafael Grossi, flew to Moscow to celebrate the 80th anniversary of the Russian nuclear industry. At that time, the official met not only with the director of Roscosmos, but also with Putin himself, and at the end posted an optimistic tweet. He wrote that he had an important exchange of views on nuclear safety with the director. But as we can see, this did not ease the tension around Europe's largest nuclear facility.
The European Union is now urgently calling for the withdrawal of troops, equipment, and all unauthorized personnel from the territory of Ukraine's Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, and to return it to Ukrainian control. Such a gigantic system cannot be managed by these terrorists. Attention needs to be paid now, not only by the European Union, but also by Trump. Attention needs to be paid by Xi Jinping, Modi. Putin is already getting ready to go to Modi. They need to be told, friends, stop. You are supporting a nuclear terrorist. This is the only one in the world, the terrorist who possesses nuclear weapons. Then in this case, you are all hostages. Because if it hits, it will hit the entire planet. And Chernobyl will seem like just a cherry on top to you.
While a time bomb is ripening in the occupied part of the Zaporizhzhia region, the Chernobyl nuclear power plant is also suffering from Russian aggression. For the second time this year, emergencies have occurred due to attacks by the Russian army. The day before, the shelling of the town of Slavutich caused the sarcophagus built over the destroyed fourth power unit of the Chernobyl nuclear power plant to be cut off from electricity. Emergency services managed to resolve the problem fairly quickly. But as we can see, the Russians are increasingly walking on the edge with their nuclear terrorism.
The echo of thunder rolled right over Europe, breaking westward. The path leads to Belarus. Lukashenko confirmed it. Moscow presents a new gift, and behind it looms the shadow of the unknown. The silence is broken by words. The nuclear risk is at its highest level. Putin smiles through gritted teeth. A new round of the game has begun. The world is frozen. The red line is fading. Will Minsk manage to step back from the edge of the abyss? You'll find out right now.
The Belarusian dictator Alexander Lukashenko is maneuvering behind the Russian Hazel Grove. As Kremlin propaganda reports, the father boasted about advanced weaponry at the Atomic Forum in Moscow. Deployed right on the border, you know? It's worth noting that Lukashenko has long been negotiating with the Kremlin about deploying Putin's intermediate-range missiles on the territory of the Republic. Supposedly, the latter is needed by the Belarusian dictator to deter NATO from deploying troops along his borders. In reality, analysts assure otherwise. All this talk is just a way to boost his own value on the world stage and bargain for better terms. If not from the West, then at least from Putin.
But
promising doesn't mean getting married. No matter how much Russian propaganda embellishes the words of the father, claiming that Putin's missile systems are already being deployed in Belarus, in reality, as it turned out, the dictator said something completely different. That's how Lukashenko brushed off the persistent journalists. No, the missile system hasn't arrived yet.
It's already on its way. Everything will be fine.
In reality, there is no missile system in Belarus, and there can't be one, experts explain. It's not even certain that Putin has more than a few operational units of this type of weapon. So there's simply nothing to hand over to Minsk. However, the bunker dweller puts on a brave face and does his best to echo Lukashenko.
These systems will be delivered to the Russian armed forces, and at the same time, we will begin deploying them on the territory of Belarus.
According to Putin, the launch silos and sites for deploying Soviet missiles left over from the Cold War are perfectly suited for the new Oreshnik system. As a result, there won't even be any need to rebuild anything. By saving on infrastructure, the Belarusians will be able to deploy these Russian missiles and put them on combat duty just days after their arrival in the Republic.
But
the further maintenance of the Russian Oreshnik will cost Lukashenko and all of Belarus a hefty sum. Some analysts believe that the country may have to work for the rest of its days just to support this one Oreshnik.
Maintaining nuclear weapons is insanely expensive. It's a huge cost. Storing and servicing them, dealing with their active components, monitoring their chemical detonators, triggers, special shelters, specialized personnel, it all adds up. Many billions are needed just to keep them operational, to support them, to maintain them.
Here, Lukashenko jokes again, saying that the Oreshnik weapon is advanced and not nuclear. Therefore, maintaining it isn't as costly.
It's not a nuclear weapon, but it's very effective, very effective.
However, Lukashenko's actions suggest the opposite. Not in words, but in deeds, the Belarusian dictator is in no hurry to deploy Putin's Oreshnik on his territory. In public, however, Batka continues to play the role of Putin's loyal ally. And apparently nothing more is needed for now.
That's all for now. This has been me, Drina Hutsakalo. We'll have even more hot news from the front in our next episode. In the meantime, don't forget to subscribe and hit the like button. See you soon.